Her betrayal is silent, but the signs are screaming Stoicism. You may not hear a word, but her body is already screaming. Betrayal doesn't always start with a hidden kiss or a deleted message. Sometimes it begins with an empty stare, a touch without intention, subtle changes in behavior that most men overlook. The truth? Many choose not to see, because facing reality hurts more than feeding the illusion. The problem isn't in her mistake, but in his silence. Men who haven't been trained to observe, discern, and protect themselves emotionally often fall into the web of emotional manipulation. Here's a hard truth. The man who ignores the signs is agreeing to his own downfall. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to control others. It teaches you to never lose control of yourself. Today, you'll learn to identify every microsignal that precedes betrayal. You'll clearly see what you used to pretend not to notice. And the best part, you'll discover how to preserve your dignity, without yelling, without begging, and without losing your essence. Because the Stoic doesn't react, he acts with presence, strategy, and emotional mastery. And it all begins with the most neglected sign of them all. The gaze that no longer admires. 1. The gaze that no longer admires. Most men only notice the abyss when they're already falling. Before physical betrayal, there is emotional betrayal, and it begins in the eyes. A gaze that no longer admires, no longer shines, that avoids direct contact. The attentive man notices it. The distracted one thinks it's just tiredness. But the gaze is the mirror of emotional presence, and when it changes, something is already gone. This is where mental presence becomes a silent weapon. A man trained in self-awareness doesn't wait for drama. He sees absence in the details, the lack of spark, the smile that doesn't come, the touch without intention. She doesn't need to say a word, because her body is already screaming what her mouth keeps silent. This is not paranoia, it's refined perception. How many ignore these signs out of fear of facing the truth? Truth demands courage, and fear prefers a comfortable lie. But a Stoic doesn't live in comfort, he lives in discernment. He doesn't judge, doesn't accuse. He observes. And constant observation is the foundation of self-mastery. Being present is being free from self-deception. A simple example, if every time she talks to you, her phone never leaves her hand, that's a red flag. It doesn't necessarily mean betrayal, but it does mean disinterest. And disinterest is the cradle of infidelity. The wise man doesn't create conspiracy theories, he gathers emotional data. He senses the energy shift before the relationship ends. From there, action becomes possible. Maybe the issue isn't another man, but the absence of yourself. Return to yourself. Refocus. Raise your value. That's more effective than begging for attention. The Stoic path doesn't ask you to react, but to strengthen yourself. To look inward before pointing outward. That's emotional self-protection. And if her gaze has changed, perhaps other behaviors are shifting too. And that's exactly what the awakened man must notice before he gets lost. There are other signs, just as subtle, that reveal what words will never confess. 2. The touch that lost its intention. The body speaks what the mouth hides. And touch, touch, is one of the first to betray. In the beginning, she touched you with presence, intention, and surrender. Over time, that touch becomes automatic, mechanical, like pressing a button without soul. For a lucid man, that's a silent alert. What used to be closeness becomes formality. The kiss becomes an obligation. The hug is procedural. Intimacy is no longer in the body. It's just a memory. A man who cultivates self-control doesn't panic, but notices this distance as an emotional thermometer. He knows, when emotion dies, the body retreats. And here lies the mistake many men make. Instead of observing, they react. They demand more affection, explanations, try to force a connection that's already falling apart. But the emotional balance of the Stoic man keeps him from humiliating himself for crumbs. He doesn't force presence. He values reciprocity. Want a practical example? Compare the simple gestures. How she holds your hand in public, or how she lays beside you in bed. If her body no longer seeks yours naturally, you're being warned, without words. Stoic wisdom teaches, listen to what is not being said. The awakened man turns this observation into internal action. Instead of begging for attention, he strengthens himself. He cares for his body, sharpens his mind, improves his external relationships. He understands that an empty touch reveals far more about her emotional state, and how far he stopped being a priority to himself. And if the touch has changed, behavior will soon follow. Sometimes in ways so subtle that only a trained eye can catch them. That's when another sign begins to surface. The the sudden change in routines that once felt predictable. 3. The routine that no longer includes you. Every healthy relationship carries a degree of predictability. Small daily rituals, spontaneous conversations, simple plans like watching something together or going out for dinner. But suddenly she becomes too busy. Her schedule fills up. Commitments take priority. And you, once a key piece in her routine, become a forgotten accessory. This isn't about control, it's about mental presence. The attentive man notices the quiet exclusion. She goes out without notice, changes schedules, avoids making plans. There's no more desire to share. No more spontaneity. Self-awareness reveals this isn't the growth of the relationship. It's emotional withdrawal disguised as evolution. At this point, many men justify it. She's just stressed. It's just a phase. But the Stoic man doesn't create excuses. He observes with discernment. He knows that constant and selective absence is a form of escape. And where there's escape, there's emotional disconnection, the breeding ground of silent betrayal. Here's a simple example. Before, weekends were shared. Now, she always needs space. You used to know where she was. Now the answers are vague. A man trained in self-mastery doesn't confront with desperation. He analyzes calmly. Because those who panic lose clarity. What should he do? Return to his center. Refocus on his projects, friendships, and self-care. Nothing repels a manipulative person more than someone who doesn't beg for presence. That's the power of a man who builds resilience. He doesn't collapse from being excluded. He grows stronger from becoming aware. And if she's removing you from her routine, she may already be silently replacing you. And when that happens, another kind of change begins to show, one that starts in her mood, but reveals much more than it seems. For the mood that swings without reason. The Stoic knows, every external change is born from an internal conflict. And mood, that involuntary messenger of the soul, doesn't lie for long. If she used to be light, affectionate, and receptive, now even a small conversation becomes irritating. Sudden impatience, sarcasm disguised as humor. These are signs. The unprepared man thinks the problem is him. He starts walking on eggshells. But the man who cultivates self-control doesn't blame himself for reactions he didn't cause. He understands that these mood swings reflect something unresolved. Maybe guilt, maybe boredom, maybe feelings for someone else. The key is, he doesn't ignore them. Here's an example. A simple comment that used to bring laughter now triggers indifference, or worse, annoyance. Stoic wisdom teaches that a person in peace is consistent. Someone in internal chaos erupts over nothing. That's why the lucid man observes her mood like a barometer of emotional integrity. But take note, this is not a reason to judge or attack. It's a call for emotional self-protection. The mature man doesn't personalize every mood swing. He analyzes the pattern. And when that pattern shifts for too long, he understands the relationship may already be elsewhere, emotionally or physically. Many men get lost here, trying to fix what they didn't break. They plan surprises, double their efforts, try to bring back the woman she used to be. But the Stoic doesn't do that. He acts with emotional balance. He improves himself not to win her back, but to avoid losing himself. And if her mood has become a windless storm, get ready, because communication will soon become a minefield. And within that tense silence lies one of the most dangerous signs of betrayal. 5. The silence that weighs more than words. When communication dies, it's because the bond has already grown sick. The absence of dialogue is not neutral, it says a lot. The woman who cheats emotionally, or even physically, starts by reducing verbal connection. Conversations turn dry, shallow. What once flowed now feels like a string of notices. A man who lives with mental presence notices this quickly. He feels the silence not as peace, but as distance. She's no longer interested in your day. She asks nothing. She listens to nothing. The absence of words becomes an emotional wall. And the Stoic, instead of banging on that wall, observes from a distance. A practical example, you say something important, and she replies with Or worse, she doesn't reply at all. And it keeps happening. Once, twice, 3 times. A man with discernment understands. She is emotionally somewhere else. And maybe physically too. He doesn't cause drama. He simply repositions himself with self-mastery, reducing emotional investment. But attention, some silences are necessary, like the wise man's silence in the face of pointless arguments. But this silence is different. It's heavy. It pushes you away. It cuts deep. And if silence starts to replace what used to be connection, The awakened man understands he's already being replaced, emotionally or otherwise. The mistake would be to fill this silence with anxious words, justifications, or attempts to please. The Stoic path is different. He turns inward. He listens to his inner voice. He reads more, trains harder, develops himself. That's resilience. He doesn't beg for attention. He attracts it by standing in integrity. And if the silence stretches on, more revealing behaviors begin to surface. Little slips, stray phrases, micro-expressions. This is where the next sign becomes impossible to ignore. When lying becomes a habit disguised as protection. 6. The sweet lies that hide bitterness. Infidelity rarely starts with a kiss. It begins with small lies. Gentle, seemingly harmless. She's just a friend. It was just a quick outing. I didn't see your message. And the most dangerous part, the man wants to believe it. So much, so that he ignores what's right in front of him. But the Stoic, even with a shaken heart, chooses clarity. Lies aren't always loud. Sometimes it's the little details, a timeline that doesn't add up, a slip of the tongue, unnecessary nerves over a simple question. The man who cultivates self-awareness doesn't need to be paranoid. He needs to be present. He notices, reflects, and chooses to respond with emotional balance. A common example, she says she's going out with a friend, but avoids giving details. You ask, and she snaps. Her reaction doesn't match the question. There's your clue. A man with discernment doesn't pretend he didn't notice, but he doesn't accuse either. He stores the data, sees the pattern, and distances himself with wisdom. The problem is that many confuse peace with passivity. The Stoic seeks peace within, not silence at any cost. If he senses manipulation, he doesn't explode, he positions himself. No drama, no begging, just clarity. He knows truth can hurt, but illusion destroys. And he prefers short-term pain over long-term regret. Stoic wisdom teaches us to accept what we cannot control and master what we can. You cannot control her choices, but you can control your reaction, your energy, your dignity. And one of the most elegant acts of strength is walking away when truth no longer lives in that space. And when lying becomes a routine, something else always follows. She'll begin shifting blame, flipping situations, creating conflict out of nothing, all to keep attention off herself. And that's the next sign you must be ready to decode. 7. The blame she throws at you. When blame starts shifting hands without reason, take it as a red flag. Suddenly, everything becomes your fault. If she grows distant, it's because you were cold. If she lies, it's because you pressured her. If she cheats, it's because you didn't understand her. This has a name, emotional inversion. The man without self-mastery enters this game without realizing it. He tries to justify, to please, to change his behavior to suit someone who has already emotionally checked out. But what he doesn't see is that this manipulation serves one purpose: distraction. It flips the focus. The guilt she carries is heavy, so she transfers it. Here's a clear example. She disappears for hours, and when you ask about it, she flips the script. Now you are the insecure one. You are the controller. The man who's built emotional self-protection doesn't fall for that. He breathes. He observes. He responds with composure. Because manipulation only works on the desperate. Stoic philosophy teaches that everyone is responsible for their own actions. If she blames you for everything, even when you're acting with balance, it reflects her character, not your worth. A strong man doesn't accept guilt for sins he didn't commit. He stands firm, even in silence, with strength and clarity. If you begin to doubt yourself because of her words, stop. Reflect. Ask questions. Write down what actually happened. Self-awareness grows when truth meets logic. Guilt, when it isn't yours, must be returned. You're not anyone's emotional trash bin. And if blame has already become routine, the next phase is unavoidable. She'll start disconnecting publicly, dropping visible signs that she no longer cares to hide. And by that point, the Stoic man must already be ready to face the most brutal sign. 8. The exposure she doesn't even try to hide anymore. There comes a moment when she doesn't even bother to pretend. Messages left open in front of you, outings without explanation, solo photos flooding her social media. It all becomes a display, a game of exposure. She's no longer trying to protect the image of the relationship. And for a man with mental presence, that silence screams. The man without emotional balance will try to argue, control, monitor. But the Stoic man does the opposite. He steps back. He understands there's no longer a bond, no longer respect. If betrayal has become public, then dignity must be reclaimed with silence and action. That's where the strength of self-mastery shows. Want an example? That unknown friend is now regularly in her comments. Her phone never faces up. She posts vague quotes about freedom and being herself, but never mentions you. The Stoic doesn't respond like a boy. He acts like a man, with resilience. Stoic wisdom doesn't teach a man to swallow everything. It teaches him not to lose himself over what he can't control. And if she's now exposing you through her actions, it's no longer about a relationship. It's about self-preservation. The one who respects himself walks away from where he is no longer valued. This isn't about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about self-control, about walking away with your integrity intact. The Stoic understands that the greatest victory isn't humiliating the other. It's not being dragged into their chaos. You walk away while you still can, with your head held high. And at the end of all this, the real question isn't why did she cheat? It's why did I ignore so many screaming signs? And that's the reflection that must happen before the cycle repeats itself. Now that you know the signs, the question is simple. Will you keep ignoring what's screaming in front of you? Or will you take back control of your life? The Stoic man doesn't wait for betrayal to wake up. He observes, reflects, and acts, with presence, not desperation. You have that power. The choice is yours. How many times have you felt something was wrong, but chose silence over truth? How many chances did you give to someone who didn't deserve even one? It's time to stop asking for explanations and start listening to your own intuition. Comment below. I no longer ignore the signs. That's your commitment to yourself, your way of showing that you won't stay blind out of convenience. If this content resonated with you, like the video, share it with a friend who needs to wake up, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications to keep learning how to protect yourself with wisdom, not with reactivity. Here, philosophy becomes armor.